When the lottery numbers flashed on the screen, I laughed, cried, and thanked God all at once. $30 million meant safety, peace, and finally resting after a lifetime of sacrifice. I imagined helping my family, especially my only son, Caleb, the boy I raised alone after his father died. But money has a way of revealing what love hides. Within days, strange things began happening. Calls with no one on the line, men watching my house, and a coldness in my son's eyes I couldn't explain. Then I uncovered the truth that shattered my heart. Caleb had hired a hitman to erase me and steal everything. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. Instead, I planned something far more dangerous. The night they believed I died, the world mourned me. My son celebrated. But what he didn't know was that I was watching every move, preparing to destroy him piece by piece. My name is Vivian Holloway. I am 66 years old, and the night I won the lottery felt like a miracle I didn't deserve anymore. When the numbers matched, my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the ticket. $30 million. After decades of working double shifts, raising a son alone, and surviving loss after loss, it felt like life was finally giving something back. I cried quietly at my kitchen table, imagining peace instead of survival. No more counting pennies. No more fear of medical bills. I thought of helping my son, of leaving him secure and proud. I believed money would heal old wounds. I didn't know that same money would expose the darkest truth of my life and turn my own child into my greatest threat. In the days that followed, my dreams felt simple and pure. I imagined paying off my small home, donating to causes that once helped me survive, and finally resting without anxiety pressing on my chest. Most of all, I imagined repairing my relationship with my son, Caleb. I told myself this money would bring us closer, erase years of quiet resentment and distance. I pictured family dinners filled with laughter instead of tension. I believed generosity would inspire gratitude. Every thought was rooted in trust, blind, unconditional trust. I didn't consider that money doesn't create character, it reveals it. While I dreamed of unity, someone else was already doing calculations. While I planned a peaceful future, a far more sinister plan was quietly taking shape behind my back. Caleb's behavior changed almost immediately. He started calling more often, asking detailed questions about the winnings, where the money was stored, who had access, whether I'd written a will. At first, I brushed it off as a concern. Then the questions became sharper, more impatient. He suggested moving the money into accounts he could help manage. He criticized my lawyer, my bank, even my caution. His tone carried something new, urgency mixed with irritation. I noticed how his eyes lingered when I spoke about control. When I laughed nervously and changed the subject, his smile faded too quickly. A quiet unease settled in my chest. This didn't feel like love. It felt like entitlement. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if my son saw me not as his mother, but as an obstacle. Then the strange things began. Phone calls where no one spoke. A car parked across the street for hours, engine running. Men I didn't recognize watching my house as I watered the plants. At night, I double-checked the locks, something I'd never done before. My instincts whispered danger, but my heart fought it. You're being paranoid, I told myself. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. Even inside my own home, I felt watched. The joy of winning dissolved into tension. I stopped sleeping through the night. Every sound felt louder, heavier. I hadn't told many people about the money, so I couldn't understand why fear had found me so quickly. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just wasn't ready to accept where the threat was coming from. The turning point came with a call from my bank manager. His voice was polite but cautious. He asked if I had authorized multiple inquiries into my accounts from an unfamiliar intermediary. I hadn't. He hesitated, then warned me that someone was attempting to gain access using personal information only family would know. My stomach dropped. When I asked for the name attached to the inquiry, he paused before answering. It was connected to someone Caleb knew. I thanked him calmly, hung up, and sat in silence for a long time. The room felt smaller, suffocating. That call shattered my denial. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a concern. Someone close to me was moving behind my back. And for the first time, fear turned into something colder, clarity. Late one evening, I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. Caleb was on the phone in the hallway, his voice low and sharp. I froze behind the door as he spoke about timelines, payments, and making something look natural. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he'd hear it. Then he said the words that drained the blood from my body. Once she's gone, the money's clean. I covered my mouth to stop myself from gasping. My legs felt weak, my mind racing. There was no misunderstanding, no explanation that could soften it. At that moment, my son stopped being my child and became my executioner. And I realized I had only two choices left: disappear or die. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I replayed every memory, every sacrifice I'd made for Caleb, trying to understand how love had turned into something so monstrous. By morning, the truth was undeniable. My son had hired someone to kill me. Not out of desperation, but greed. The betrayal hurt more than the fear, more than the danger. I cried silently, mourning the child I thought I raised, but grief didn't last long. Survival demanded action. I understood something crucial then. If I confronted him, I'd be dead. If I ran, I'd be hunted. So I made a different choice. One that would let him believe he'd won. One that would give me time. Time to disappear. Time to plan. And time to make sure his evil would destroy him instead of me. The shock didn't come with screaming or collapsing the way movies show. It came quietly, like ice spreading through my veins. I moved through the house as if nothing had changed, cooking, cleaning, smiling when needed. Inside, my heart felt shattered beyond repair. The betrayal wasn't just that my son wanted me dead, it was that he could plan it so calmly. I studied him now, noticing how easily he lied, how natural cruelty looked on him. Every word he spoke carried double meaning. I mourned the son I thought I had while watching the man he truly was. Fear sat heavy in my chest, but I forced myself to stay still. Panic would get me killed. Silence, observation, and patience were the only things keeping me alive. I became an actress in my own life. I laughed when Caleb joked, agreed when he gave advice, and thanked him for looking out for me. Every normal moment felt surreal, like walking on glass while pretending it was solid ground. I watched his expressions carefully, learning when he was lying and when he was calculating. He believed I was unaware that I was still the trusting, aging mother he could manipulate. That belief became my shield. At night, I locked my bedroom door and sat in silence, replaying every conversation. I didn't cry anymore. Tears were dangerous. I needed clarity, not comfort. Pretending everything was fine was exhausting, but it bought me something invaluable: time. Time was now my greatest weapon. Confirming the hitman's identity terrified me more than hearing about him. Through careful listening and subtle probing, I pieced together fragments, names mentioned casually, locations hinted at, payments disguised as favors. I used public records, burner phones, and late-night research to confirm what my instincts already knew. The man existed. He had a history, and he had been paid. Seeing his face on a screen made the threat real in a way words never could. My hands shook, but my resolve hardened. This wasn't paranoia. This was a planned murder. Knowing who he was didn't make me feel safer, it made everything urgent. The clock was ticking, and every breath I took felt borrowed. Once I confirmed the truth, time became my enemy. I didn't know when the plan would move forward, only that it would. Every knock at the door startled me. Every unfamiliar sound made my heart race. I stopped leaving the house unless necessary, careful not to change my routine too much. I slept lightly, always listening. I realized something chilling: Caleb didn't need to rush. He believed he was in control. That confidence gave me a narrow window to act. I understood now that survival wasn't about bravery, it was about precision. One mistake, one emotional slip, and I would disappear for real. Whatever I did next had to be flawless. I began recording everything: conversations, messages, bank notifications. I documented dates, times, and patterns, hiding copies in places only I could access. I kept my phone on silent recording during conversations with Caleb, my heart pounding as his words unknowingly sealed his fate. Each piece of evidence felt like armor. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was building a case. The process was terrifying, but empowering. Fear slowly transformed into focus. I stopped feeling hunted and started feeling prepared. If I was going to disappear, it would be on my terms, and when the truth came out, it would be undeniable. The more I listened, the clearer the plan became. Caleb wasn't acting on impulse. This was calculated, timed around the lottery payout, structured to look like an accident. He planned to mourn publicly, inherit quietly, and move on guilt-free. That realization broke something inside me, but it also freed me. There was no misunderstanding left to cling to. He had chosen money over blood, power over love. As painful as it was, clarity brought strength. I no longer questioned my next steps. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about survival and consequence, and I knew now exactly what kind of ending he deserved. That night, I made my decision. I couldn't confront him. I couldn't run. I had to vanish. If Caleb believed I was dead, the threat would disappear with me. The idea terrified me, but it also gave me control for the first time. I began planning my disappearance with the same care he planned my death. I would let him think he'd won, let him celebrate, let him make mistakes. From the shadows, I would watch, wait, and prepare. This wasn't escape, it was strategy. And as I closed my eyes that night, one thought anchored me: I would survive this. And when the time came, he would finally understand what it means to underestimate a mother. Once I decided to disappear, every detail mattered. A fake death couldn't look dramatic or suspicious. It had to feel painfully ordinary. I studied accidents, insurance procedures, police timelines, and news reports late into the night. The goal wasn't mystery, it was closure. I chose a scenario that explained everything and raised no questions. I rehearsed reactions, documents, and evidence, forcing myself to think like an investigator, not a victim. The hardest part wasn't logistics. It was accepting that the world would mourn me while I stayed silent. I was planning my own ending so I could survive the next chapter. Fear followed every step, but clarity guided my hands. This wasn't running away. This was a strategy disguised as tragedy. To disappear convincingly, I had to leave behind a believable trail. I began withdrawing small amounts of money, visiting places I'd never returned to, and making quiet changes that looked harmless on the surface. I planted digital footprints, searches, emails, plans that pointed in the wrong direction. Financial smoke screens were layered carefully, ensuring no single move looked intentional. I wanted investigators to see a tired woman overwhelmed by sudden wealth, not someone planning revenge. Even my emotions became part of the act. I complained openly about stress, exhaustion, and fear, making my eventual disappearance feel inevitable. Every false trail wasn't just misdirection, it was protection. The more convincing the illusion, the safer I would be once I vanished. I knew I couldn't do this completely alone. I chose one person, Martin Hale, an old family acquaintance who owed me his life after I helped him years ago. I didn't tell him everything, only what he needed to know. I looked him in the eyes and asked a simple question. If I disappear, can you keep a secret forever? He didn't hesitate. Martin helped me secure a safe location, fake documentation, and a way to exist quietly without being seen. Trusting someone again terrified me, but survival required risk. He never asked why. He never judged. That loyalty reminded me that not all bonds were broken. It gave me strength when fear tried to take over. The day it happened, my heart was steady in a way that scared me. The accident unfolded exactly as planned, messy enough to be believable, tragic enough to end questions. Sirens screamed, chaos followed, and my name was spoken in the past tense. I watched from a distance, hidden and shaking, as strangers reacted to the end of my life. Police reports were written. Statements were taken. There was sympathy, confusion, and finality. The world accepted my death quickly. That was the point. As night fell, I wasn't Vivian Holloway anymore. I was a ghost, breathing, watching, alive. The woman everyone knew was gone, and the woman who remained was free to plan what came next. Standing far from the crowd, hidden behind dark glasses and borrowed clothes, I watched my own funeral. Hearing my name spoken like a memory felt surreal, like listening to someone else's life. Friends cried, neighbors whispered. People said kind things they'd never said while I was alive. I felt grief not for myself, but for the illusion of family I once believed in. The flowers, the prayers, the finality, it all felt heavy and hollow. I kept my head down, heart pounding, knowing I couldn't react. This was the cost of survival. As the service ended, I searched the crowd for one face, the only one that mattered. My son's. Caleb stood near the front, dressed perfectly, receiving condolences with practiced ease. At first, he looked solemn, but not broken. His eyes were dry. Posture relaxed. He played the role of the grieving son flawlessly. But then something shifted. When he thought no one was watching, relief crossed his face. Relief. That moment confirmed everything. There was no regret, no guilt, only satisfaction. My chest tightened, but clarity followed immediately. I hadn't imagined his betrayal. I hadn't misunderstood anything. Watching him perform grief while feeling freedom hardened something inside me. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was reckoning. And he had no idea it was coming. Later that night, hidden where shadows protected me, I saw the truth that sealed his fate. Caleb laughed, he drank, he talked about finally being free. There was no mourning, only celebration. Hearing him joke about my death felt like a second betrayal, somehow worse than the first. Any lingering doubt died in that moment. The boy I raised was gone. What remained was someone who believed he'd won, and that belief would destroy him. As I slipped away into the night, something inside me settled. He thought the story was over. He thought I was gone forever, but my disappearance wasn't the end. It was the opening move. Living in hiding wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, disciplined, and lonely. I learned how to exist without patterns, without attachments, without being remembered. Every morning, I reminded myself that patience was my strongest weapon now. I followed news about my own death, watched timelines move forward, and listened carefully for whispers about my son. The world moved on faster than I expected. That hurt, but it also freed me. In anonymity, I began rebuilding control piece by piece. I wasn't powerless anymore, I was simply unseen, and unseen people observe everything. This new life wasn't about comfort, it was about preparation. Every silent day added pressure to the truth waiting beneath the surface. The fortune Caleb believed he owned was never fully within his reach. I had planned safeguards long before disappearing. With Martin's help, I activated legal backdoors, trust clauses, delayed transfers, dormant accounts, each one perfectly legitimate and impossible to challenge without exposing fraud. Funds moved slowly, quietly, without triggering alarms. I wanted the shifts to feel like errors, not theft. Caleb grew frustrated, confused, but not suspicious enough. That was intentional. Every dollar repositioned was leverage reclaimed. I wasn't stealing from him. I was retrieving what he tried to take by murder. The system he underestimated became the cage closing around him. The hardest part was restraint. I could have acted sooner, struck harder, but I needed Caleb comfortable. So I let him believe he had won. I let him spend recklessly, brag quietly, and plan a future built on my absence. His confidence grew into arrogance. He stopped checking details, stopped covering tracks. Greed made him careless. Every risky move he made tightened the knot around his own neck. I watched from a distance as he became exactly who the investigators would believe he was. Letting him feel safe wasn't mercy, it was strategy. People reveal their worst selves when they think no one is watching. I didn't go to the police emotionally. I went methodically. Using intermediaries and protected channels, I delivered fragments, financial inconsistencies, suspicious communications, anonymous tips that forced attention without revealing my existence. Each alert triggered quiet reviews, not arrests. That was intentional. I wanted investigators curious, not alarmed. When patterns began to form, I added more pieces, enough to point in one direction. Caleb's direction. I was never accused. I let evidence speak. The system responds faster when it thinks it discovered something itself. By the time official eyes focused on him, he had no idea how long he'd already been under scrutiny. Greed makes people sloppy. Caleb reused phones, trusted the wrong people, and kept records he thought were harmless. That's where I found everything. Conversations about hiring help, payments that didn't match explanations, timelines that expose intent. I documented everything carefully, preserving originals and backups. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger, it was built on precision. Every piece of proof had to survive legal fire. When I reviewed the full picture, I felt something unexpected, calm. The truth was undeniable now. All that remained was timing. And timing, unlike emotion, is something you can control. I baited him with opportunity. A financial move he couldn't resist. A shortcut promising faster access to money he believed was rightfully his. I knew exactly how he'd respond, because greed always answers the same way. He took the risk, ignored warnings, and stepped exactly where I needed him. Every decision he made was documented, monitored, and timestamped. He thought he was outsmarting a system. In reality, he was completing my work for me. Watching him rush forward felt like watching someone sprint toward a cliff they refused to see. The trap wasn't forceful. It was inviting. When the final piece settled, I knew it was time. The evidence was complete, the authorities were ready. And Caleb had sealed his own fate without realizing it. I took a breath and allowed myself one moment of reflection, not regret, not sadness, but certainty. This wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about truth standing where lies once lived. I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was prepared. The woman he tried to erase was about to return, not as a victim, but as the author of his downfall. And the world was finally ready to hear my voice again. If this story has you holding your breath, make sure you like the video and subscribe now, because what happens next changes everything. I didn't announce myself gently. I waited for the worst possible moment for him, the moment he felt untouchable. When I stepped forward, alive and undeniable, the room went silent. His face drained of color as years of lies collapsed in seconds. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't angry. I was calm in a way that terrified him more than rage ever could. I told the truth simply, clearly, and without emotion. Every eye turned from him to me, from confidence to confusion. In that instant, I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the proof he thought would never exist. And I watched him realize that the past he tried to bury had just stood up and spoken. I didn't accuse him loudly. I didn't need to. The evidence arrived first, documents, recordings, timelines, and financial trails assembled so carefully they left no room for interpretation. Authorities moved in with quiet efficiency, not drama. That's how real consequences arrive. As questions were asked, his answers fell apart. Each lie contradicted the last. I stayed seated, watching professionals do what they do best when truth is handed to them intact. This wasn't chaos. It was a procedure, and procedure is merciless when guilt is clear. The plan he once believed was perfect had already condemned him. All I had done was wait for the right moment to let the truth breathe. When he finally understood that I had orchestrated everything, his eyes met mine, not with anger but disbelief. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then stopped. There was nothing left to say, no manipulation left to try, no one is left to blame. At that moment, I didn't see my son. I saw a man facing the full weight of his choices for the first time. The realization hit him slowly, painfully, that I hadn't survived by luck but by intention. That every move he made after my death had been observed, recorded, and anticipated. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The truth was punishment enough. The arrest wasn't loud. There were no cameras at first, no shouting, no spectacle, just handcuffs, clear charges, and a stunned silence that followed him out the door. Later, the story spread on its own. People asked questions. Records were reviewed. Reputations collapsed under verified facts. Everything he built in my absence crumbled quickly once truth replaced assumption. Watching his public image dissolve felt less like victory and more like closure. I hadn't wanted him humiliated, I wanted him stopped. And that's exactly what happened. His lies didn't explode, they dissolved. And that quiet ending felt more powerful than any dramatic confrontation ever could. Reclaiming my fortune wasn't emotional, it was legal, final, and irreversible. Trusts activated. Accounts transferred, claims dismissed. Every safeguard I'd put in place did its job. There were no arguments left to be made. The money returned not as a reward but as restoration. It wasn't about wealth anymore. It was about ownership of my life, my choices, and my future. I signed the final papers without shaking hands, without tears. I felt lighter than I had in years. He tried to take everything from me. Instead, he gave me clarity. And clarity, I learned, is worth more than any amount of money. People asked if I would forgive him. They expected a softer ending. But forgiveness isn't required for peace. I chose distance. Permanent, intentional distance. I cut emotional ties without drama, explanation, or regret, not out of hatred, but self-respect. Some betrayals don't deserve repair. They deserve boundaries. I released the role of mother to someone who no longer deserved access to my life. And in doing so, I felt something unexpected, freedom. I didn't carry his guilt anymore. I didn't carry the past. I carried myself forward. That was the real victory. I didn't disappear again. I didn't hide. I rebuilt a life quietly, honestly, on my own terms. I wake up each day knowing I survived not just an attempt on my life, but the illusion that love excuses cruelty. I walk freely now, unafraid of shadows, unburdened by silence. My story ended the moment I stopped being afraid of the truth. I am alive. I am finished with running. And I am finally at peace, not because justice was loud, but because it was complete.